Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chi-Town Sports Podcast. Today, Ben and I are joined with Mr. Pete Fiutak, owner and lead writer over at the College Football News website. Posted a lot of college football and NFL related stories throughout the week. Um, Ben and I each have a few questions for him. We'll just go down the line. We're going to start off first with his career and how he got into what he's doing now. I'll start. Thank you for joining us really quickly as well, Mr. Pete Fiutak. Big Ten Network host Dave Revson came on our show and talked about not needing a degree in broadcasting or journalism. Did you get a degree in journalism, or did you go to school like Dave for another subject?
Well, Dave Revson's a hack, so let's just start with that. And I'm just joking. I know him. He's a friend of mine. He's a really good guy. Yeah, you don't need to necessarily have a degree in journalism or broadcast to do any of this stuff. And it's kind of it's way different now than when guys like Dave and I were younger and doing all this kind of stuff. Because now, especially with guys your age, and everyone knows what a Zoom call is. Everyone knows how to TikTok, and everyone is just grows up with a phone and with a camera, and that's just not really the way it was when I started this over 20 years ago. That it just you didn't have you had camcorders and things like this, but nobody had iPhones. The internet had just started when I was first starting this, first started CFN back in 1998. So I did go to college for communications. I did because that was easy to get through. But I wrote on the school paper, and that really sort of did everything else for everything else that I wanted to do. Because okay, all the classes I took were fine and everything. But what really got me into this was writing, being a sports writer for the school newspaper. But more than that, it was learning how to do ad sales. So when I was at the college paper, I was in the advertising side and just sort of wrote sports to go along with it. And that mattered more than anything else because I got into the sports side of things after college, selling ads first for Pro Football Weekly, and
Wow.
without actually doing sports writing for them. And so, because I learned how to sell ads, then when the opportunity was there to start a website, I knew how to sell advertising for it and make money off it because that's sort of better than anything else. And that's what people nowadays, excuse me, know how to do better than anyone is market yourself, whether it's a YouTube channel, a TikTok account. People just know the who grow up knowing how to market themselves and get a following, and then it's a question of how can you monetize that and then do something like this for a living because it's a hard business. It just, especially right now, there are so many people who are, worrying about their jobs, looking for jobs, all that sort of thing. So if you kind of know how to make money doing this, or if you're talented like Dave Revson is and can do this at Big Ten Network, it's great. But it's hard. But you know what? At the same time, it's a whole lot of fun, obviously.
For sure. All right, Ben.
So that you touched on this with your last answer with Brad, but I kind of want to know how you broke into the college football media business after college and what the journey was like that led you to running CFN.
I can tell you exactly what it was. I've always been more of I was actually a college basketball fan more than anything else. When I grew up with your dad, Ben, basketball was really more of the sport. But really, it was liking basketball and college football more than the pro side of this. But loved pro side because I loved fantasy football, and I always loved the NFL. I was always a big football fan more than anything else. And when I was working at Pro Football Weekly, and the internet, as we know, it was just sort of getting started, and there just wasn't anything out there for college football. And one day we were looking around, okay, who's getting the most traffic out there? This is even before Google. I mean, this is before all these other things that we just kind of take for granted now. And there are all these different sort of ways to look at things. And one day noticed that the one sports thing out there that was crushing everything else was like a Dallas newspaper. Excuse me, I get a little tickle in my throat. A Dallas newspaper that would have recruiting rankings that would just kill everything. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on just a quick second. I've got this is
No
tickle in my
problem.
throat.
No worries.
You can edit this out if you can. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. So anyway, so we noticed that this Dallas newspaper website was just crushing it when it had recruiting rankings and even just any sort of light ranking stuff. Now, and so then I was at the Pro Football Weekly offices and had my own internet account on there, my own laptop, and just kind of looked up, all right, what kind of sports websites are out there, to domain names, and looked like, okay, collegefootball.com, no, college football weekly, no, all right, college football news, all right. And it just turned
Wow.
out that was available. Got it, and then started up and just sort of kept it on rolling from there.
Well, that's pretty interesting story, and pretty impressive. And my next question, kind of as a media insider, you've been to some fairly momentous college football games, and you've been right near the action at a bunch of them. I want to know what experiences / games have really stood out to you during your years in the college football world.
Well, fortunately, I was able to do a college football playoff, be a part of the college football playoff in stadium things when it first started up for the first 5 years. I went to the final BCS championship game too. So I was also able to get media pass on the field. My number one was the Georgia-Alabama national championship, where I stood at the back of the end zone when Tua Tagovailoa threw the game-winning touchdown pass to Devontae Smith in overtime. And it came right at me. And I have the video of it where you see the pass going up. It was the 2nd and 26 going right in the air. And Devontae Smith ran right across me for the touchdown, literally 5 feet away. And it's funny because you can kind of see me in the replays of it, just right in the back of the end zone there. That one was among the best. Being right there for the Alabama-Clemson national championship games were pretty cool. One of my favorite moments was it was in Arizona when it was Clemson, Alabama, and there was a 2-point conversion, and Deshaun Watson was trying to run for the 2-point conversion, and I'm standing right on the goal line. And again, you can kind of see on the TV, you can see my legs in it, but you can't see me. And he is coming right at me at about 1,000 miles per hour. And the two Alabama linebackers just had a beat on him, and he was coming right at me, and I couldn't move. And all of a sudden, like, oh man, he is going to absolutely truck me, and I'm going to be I'm going to be a meme somewhere as this guy with a broken leg, because these guys are going to come at me, and I'm going to get blown up, and it's going to be really bad. And just the athleticism of these guys. At the last final second, he plants his foot and cuts up field, and those guys just collided and huge miles. I just saved me. He didn't get in, but that all happened like right in front of me. But just being out there for those national championship games was really, really cool. My other one moment of actually that game, which was just brutal. So the game ends, and I'm on the field. The journalist and the media can get on the field in the final few minutes, but I was on the field the whole game, so I was kind of able to get the best view of it. I kind of figured this out a long time ago. I went right at Deshaun, and Deshaun and Derrick Henry met at right around midfield, and I got there before anybody else. I put my phone up, and I got out before anybody. I right there. I had it right in their faces to get the greeting at the very end of the thing. I was totally jacked. I'm like, yes, I've got Deshaun and Derrick Henry. And I come back down like, oh, I didn't hit record. And so I yelled. I was almost like, guys, can you guys do that again? Can you guys get back there and talk a little further? With obviously that, but no. So it's fun. I mean, it's, to me, also the geekiest fun part about this whole thing is anytime you're on a field or a court or something that's really just kind of any stadium that has any sort of moment you can have, and just like standing in midfield of the Rose Bowl when nobody's around, it just kind of like just kind of knowing everything that happened there. And then every time you watch the Rose Bowl ever since, like, yeah, I kind of stood right there on that field, or just in any of these places, it's always just sort of fun. So there, even as long as I've done this, that's one of those things that's still just really, really cool.
Yeah, that just sounds awesome to me. All right.
All right. Let's get to some football questions. I'll start first. Nick Saban earlier today was tested positive for COVID-19. Steve Sarkisian will take over play calling and head coaching duties for the Iron Bowl. Do you see a drop off in production, or will this team continue to dominate?
That Alabama team is such a machine. Obviously, you don't get better when you don't have Nick Saban on the sidelines. But the thing about Alabama, and especially Nick Saban, he really preaches this whole idea of the process, trust the process, and it's almost, it's not become a joke in any way, but it's become, okay, the process. But there's a reason why Alabama is awesome every year. They do everything the exact same way all the time, and it might be, very businesslike. It might not be a whole lot of fun at sometimes for some of these, players. But if you're going to Alabama, you are going to be in these big games because they have a way of doing things. And of course, Saban not being on the field is, matters somewhat. But the real worth of a college football coach at this point, especially like Saban, is one, recruiting and getting the guys there in the first place.
Oh, their recruiting classes are bonkers.
Yes, and it's also the ability to just game plan and have everything in place going forward. Not saying the three of us could go out there and coach them to a win tomorrow, but we probably could come close. But it does matter a little bit. But a guy like Sarkisian, I mean, that guy is he's a major college football caliber coach, so they're going to be just fine with him.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, so this next one is about our last night. It was a big night in football with the first official college football playoff rankings announcement. What were your main takeaways from this first batch of rankings with one loss Clemson above Ohio State, and who do you think is underrated / overrated?
By the way, that is another thing to kind of humble brag it out. You asked about what the coolest things to do. I've been able to go through that process down there in Texas and go through the whole thing and see how it works and work with the college football playoff guys. And it's really it's geeky cool, mainly because of how they do it. It's not romantic at all. It's all guys just sitting there, girls too, and sitting there and just yelling at each other about which team should be ranked ahead of the other ones. But in terms of who's overrated and underrated, it really is all about the college football playoffs. A big exercise to come up with the top 4 teams. So really, if the teams that are around 15-ish to 25 or so, it's fun. You can get into a debate, and there are some teams on there that should not be that high. For example, Iowa State should not be ranked ahead of Louisiana, who isn't ranked at all. Louisiana's from the Sun Belt Conference, no big deal. But
they beat Iowa State.
Yeah,
Louisiana just blew up Iowa State to start the season. Their only other loss is to Coastal Carolina, who's unbeaten.
It's a good team.
And so it's you can quibble. There's ways to quibble over that. And the only reason why that matters is for the judgment of the committee itself. You want to know that everything else is right. But at the end of the day, these are all just fun exercises and practice, because all that matters is, did you win your Power 5 conference? Did you do it going undefeated or with one loss? Because a Power 5 conference champion who's undefeated is almost always a lock to get in this thing. And if your one-loss team is also pretty much a lock to get in as well. So pretty much we know that there's going to be the SEC champion, the ACC champion, the Big Ten champion is almost certain to get in this thing, as long as Ohio State doesn't biff it against Michigan or Northwestern gag along the way. And then there's going to be that 4th spot, which is either going to be Notre Dame if Clemson, as long as it doesn't get blown away by Clemson in the ACC championship, or maybe a Texas A&M if it wins out, or Alabama and Florida if Florida somehow wins the SEC championship.
So you don't see a chance for a Group of 5 team or like BYU?
At the end of the day, the part of the college football playoff committee problem is they don't mean this to do this really, but they're mean. They kind of tease and say, yeah, you guys are going to be close here at Cincinnati or some UCF a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But especially this year, you look at the schedule, and the problem with Cincinnati, even if it keeps ripping everyone up, is it's not going to have a win over a Power 5 program.
Mhm.
And if you don't have, and it's kind of unfair when you've got, say, Texas A&M, who plays all SEC teams, or Northwestern, who's playing an all Big Ten schedule, and you say, well, okay, well, Northwestern, you played an all Big Ten schedule, and you have one loss, and that one loss is to Ohio State, who is one of the top 3 teams, or Texas A&M, you played an all SEC schedule, and you beat Florida, and your one loss is to Alabama on the road. Oh, and Cincinnati, okay, you beat, SMU. It just doesn't really compare. Yeah. So it would be nice to see them get a shot, Group of 5 at some point. But this year of all years, because Cincinnati does not have a Power 5 win, and neither does BYU, it's kind of hard to put either one of them in. It's not fair to say, yeah, what you were able to do is good, but you didn't have to do the week in and week out thing that the Power 5 teams do.
Okay. All right. That is tough to hear for a Group of 5 fan, but
it goes perfectly into my question, though.
Yeah, or if you're a group, a fan of Michigan too, by the way.
We'll touch on Michigan later.
I'm sorry.
So BYU was 14th. Shocked Ben and I called Ben right away saying, "Where's Michigan?" I was shocked Michigan was not ranked in the top 25. I like to hurt Ben about what's going on right now in Ann Arbor, but
that's not very nice. That's just mean.
So I was looking at BYU and Cincinnati's respective schedules. BYU has played 9 games. They're hoping to add an 11th and 12th. They have one more game on December 12th, currently slated against San Diego State. BYU and Cincinnati both have December 5th open. Could you possibly see a BYU-Cincy duel? And let's say BYU or Cincinnati wins. Would that make up for no Power 5 games and propel them into the top 4?
Good question. It doesn't hurt. What they really need, though, is a Washington or an Oregon. And that's kind of where the Pac-12 comes into this, because the Pac-12, because they don't have a whole lot of games and they're losing them left and right because of cancellations, the Pac-12 is saying that it can go find non-conference games. The problem is the Pac-12 is starting to find games against other Pac-12 teams. Like this weekend, Washington's game against Washington State was canceled. Utah's game against Arizona State was canceled. So Washington and Arizona State are going to hook up. So it's plus it doesn't do the Pac-12 any good to play a BYU. But
you don't think?
Well, there's no need. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it doesn't help them because, again, if it just depends on where the other big teams are going to do. However, if a USC or Oregon or Washington goes undefeated and wins the Pac-12 title, I don't think you need BYU to boost your resume. I think almost if USC or Oregon or Washington are able to play a full 6-game regular season schedule and win a Pac-12 championship, they're probably in. So, beating BYU is fine. Can't really help them as much, and it could kill them.
I have not heard that. I'm going to be completely honest. I have not seen pretty much anywhere, let's say 7-0 Oregon, USC, or Washington team propelling Notre Dame or a team like Florida if they upset, or Northwestern if they upset, or Cincinnati. I have not seen a Pac-12 team in the end of the regular and title game season being top 6.
I will tell you this right now, that if you were to take the ESPN people and put them under a lie detector test and say, what is your dream scenario?
Have a Pac-12 team make it. And Michigan. Michigan.
Exactly. No, their dream in this whole thing would be to have somehow would be to get Alabama and Ohio State into one of the college football playoffs, which probably wouldn't happen because you got to figure that they're both probably going to go undefeated to get there. But if they could somehow manufacture it where it would be Notre Dame versus USC in the Rose Bowl. That would be their absolute dream of a college football playoff semifinal. But that's not how the College Football Playoff Committee works it. They really don't play. I know there's an easy narrative that says that they want certain things. They really don't think like that. They really do try to come up with the best system possible. But again, remember just how massive the Power 5 conferences are in terms of influence. And so again, if you're talking at the end, you've got an SEC champion. Let's say Alabama does roll through. Then Alabama's in no matter what. Let's say Ohio State rolls through; it's in no matter what.
Sure.
And then the ACC champion, whoever it is. Let's say if in a perfect world to make this quick, clean, and easy, it's Notre Dame and Clemson has 2 losses. It's harder for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 kind of gets hosed if Clemson wins, and if they blow out Notre Dame, then it becomes a little more of an argument. If they win close and Notre Dame looks good, it's going to be tough because then they might just put both Notre Dame and Clemson in. But let's say, to make it easy, let's say Notre Dame beats Clemson. So Clemson's out with 2 losses. Florida's out with 2 losses. And then it comes down to a Cincinnati team that played an all Power 5 schedule, or a USC team or Oregon team that played an all Pac-12 schedule. They're going to take the team that played the all Group 5, Power 5 schedule. They would definitely take a Pac-12 undefeated Pac-12 champion, and that's where what really is important would be if USC gets through unbeaten and somehow is able to play an unbeaten Washington or Oregon for the Pac-12 title, because then if it's 6-0 versus 6-0, that just raises everything for whoever wins that. It just elevates the champion no matter what.
All right, Ben.
We're gonna move to a less lofty group like team, and that is Michigan. As a lifelong Michigan fan, it's been tough to watch as the team has fallen on hard times. Obviously, it's a difficult year to judge too harshly, but the level of play has still been unacceptable. How do you see the rest of Jim Harbaugh's tenure panning out, and does he, in your eyes, deserve the job next season?
Ben, I'm just going to say this. You don't have to be. You have a choice here. You don't let your parents screw you up. I'm here to rescue you from your mother and say you do not have to root for Michigan. It is okay to find other teams and other schools to go on for. In fact, it'll be a better life for you if you're able to kind of break away from this. Look, I've been a Jim Harbaugh apologist. He's an all right dude. He's trying. He's an elite coach who, if he leaves this job, will end up being an NFL coach somewhere. Yeah. As soon as he leaves, he'll make a lot more money. The problem with the Michigan job is, okay, if you get rid of Jim Harbaugh, who's the head coach out there who's going to take this job, and it won't be Urban Meyer, who is going to all of a sudden make Ohio State bad? Because because it doesn't matter who takes the job, Ohio State's still going to be a monster. And look, this is just a weird year, and it's not fair to other teams who are rocking and rolling to win.
Did we lose him, Ben?
We might have lost him.
There we go.
I'm back, sorry. So it might just be 2020. In some ways where everything was thrown off. You didn't have a normal practice. You didn't have a normal off season. It's just not the same as it usually is. But at the same time, look, as crazy as it sounds, I don't think it's going to happen. What happens if Michigan beats Ohio State this year? What happens if this is the one year that this happens?
I could not see it happening.
Then Harbaugh gets an extension.
He's going to probably get an extension anyway. So I still think he's a good enough coach. What gets lost in all this, and it's a typical Michigan fan completely forgets this. They were right there. You remember 2 years ago, they went into that Ohio State game where they win that. They're in they go to the Big Ten championship. They would have beaten Northwestern,
but they'd have
been in the college football playoff. They got blown up. But again, that's Northwestern, and Ohio State. That's like getting mad about saying, well, you lost to Alabama or Clemson. Ohio State's just at another level. And the problem with this year with Jim Harbaugh is before this year, Jim Harbaugh just never, ever lost to the mediocre teams. He always lost to Alabama and Ohio State. But when you lose like you did this year to these teams, that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, that's a good answer. What do you got, Brad?
Let's talk college football playoff again. When December 20th rolls around, you already addressed this a little bit, and the full rankings are announced. Who are your top 6 teams keeping conference title and marquee matchups left in mind?
If I'm predicting what it's going to be,
Your predictions,
I
yeah.
think it's going to be. My prediction is going to be number one at the end of the rainbow. It's going to be number one Alabama. I think it's going to be number 2 in the final. 2 and 3. Remember, part of the problem with the college football playoff is 2 and 3 doesn't matter. If you're 2 or 3, you got to play each other anyway. So in some way, shape, or form, I think it's going to be Ohio State and Clemson are going to be 2 and 3. And then there's going to be the big debate over Notre Dame versus Texas A&M for that 4th spot. And I think at the end of the day, I think Notre Dame's going to end up getting it. As long as they just don't get completely annihilated. If
Texas
they
A&M
come out and get blasted like 48-10, I think it turns into Texas A&M. And I do think, again, watch out for the if the Pac-12 champions undefeated. I do think they're going to get close, but it'll probably be 5 or 6. But then that doesn't help anybody. And then Cincinnati is probably going to be 5 or 6 and be like, well, they got close, but not quite.
My problem with Texas A&M though, Pete, is they got blown out to Bama. They beat Florida, which is huge, but they're not going to make the championship game unless Alabama loses 2 games, which I don't think anyone has happening. Will that matter?
No.
Or no, you don't think so?
Remember that the whole idea of the College Football Playoff Committee is that they are allowed to pick any. They could pick like Utah State and University of Massachusetts if they wanted. They don't have to take anybody. Their whole thing is they pick the 4 best teams. And if the rationale in that room, and you kind of saw this in the first rankings where they did have Texas A&M up high ahead of Florida, is they said, all right, Texas A&M, you beat Florida. That is a great win considering that Florida beat Georgia and they're ripping through everybody else. And all right, your one loss is at Alabama. Well, if Alabama's the number 1 team in the country, that's about as acceptable as it gets. So they don't punish them for that. And, I don't really want to see Alabama play Texas A&M in a rematch. That's no fun. But if, on a 4 best team theory, if Florida is great and you think they're really that good, well, I think they get in unless, again, you have unbeaten USC playing an unbeaten, or Colorado for that matter, I should say, from the Pac-12 South. If you have 2 unbeaten teams from the Pac-12 play each other in the Pac-12 championship, I think then maybe, again, watch out for the Pac-12 champ out of that to maybe push out Texas A&M if Notre Dame doesn't get obliterated. If Notre Dame is just close, if Notre Dame looks okay, that's the 4 seed going against Alabama.
I also, to add on to that, Notre Dame, so Bama beat Texas A&M in Tuscaloosa. Notre Dame beat number 1 Clemson in South Bend. Of course, that game was a double overtime and was close. Without Trevor Lawrence. But still, I don't know. Texas A&M will not have a top 3 win unless Auburn beats That's a bunch of what ifs. Texas A&M will not have a top 3 win. They will have a top 4 win against Florida, but Notre Dame will have a number 1 win.
But do they have a loss against North Carolina this Saturday? Or Wake Forest, if at the very end there. It'll be pretty entertaining to see how that happens. But yeah, I'm with you. It's the argument's going to be, though, is like you just said. And if Notre Dame they didn't have Trevor Lawrence, but that didn't matter because
Ungalele put up 440.
Yeah, he was great. So that really didn't matter. But it was at home, double overtime. They pulled it out at the end. But again, if they lose 58-10, or they just get destroyed, I don't think the appetite's going to be there to say, well, okay, well, you had your shot. That was kind of like a playoff game. We'll see what happens going forward, which again, to your point, that's where I would think they would probably go somebody different because they would say, all right, we already saw Alabama play Texas A&M, and we got that. Texas A&M won. And remember, the College Football Playoff Committee, again, there's no written rules here, but it's kind of suggested that they care about conference championships more than anything else. So, very famously, in the first ever college football playoff, TCU was number 3 in the second to last college football playoff ranking. Blew out Iowa State. I want to say it was 42-3. Did everything right, everything great. However, they didn't technically win the Big 12 championship because they lost to Baylor, and in the tiebreaker, Baylor was sort of technically the champion. So they left them both out, put Ohio State in because they won the Big 10 championship, and then Ohio State went on to win the national title. So you can have any configuration you want, and then at the end of the rainbow, the college football playoff committee can say, you know what, we have 4 undefeated, let's say we have 3 undefeated Power 5 champions. We have Alabama, we have Ohio State, we have USC, and we have Clemson, who avenged their one loss. Now that Trevor Lawrence is back, they avenged their loss. We're going to put them in as well. And then there's your Final Four.
All right. One last question. We're talking NFL draft now. This question is on Ben and I's mind pretty much every day. Your site, College Football News, covers college football, of course, but also has some mock drafts when the draft comes around. You did call the Bears drafting Cole Kmet and a DB in your mock last year. The DB was not Jalen Johnson, it was Christian Fulton, but very close. With that being said, from what you have seen this year, who should be drafted higher in the upcoming draft? Kyle Trask or Mac Jones?
The funny part about both of those two is they're probably the 5th and 6th quarterbacks off the board. Kyle Trask is probably a little more polished, ready, and talented than Mac Jones is, but they're both sort of in the same good starting quality way. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence is going to be the first quarterback off the board. Figure Justin Fields is probably the second one. Trey Lance, North Dakota State's probably the third one. Zach Wilson out of BYU has risen up into be that 4th guy. It depends. Kyle Trask is probably going to win the Heisman. He's going to be just that good. He's going to remind people of this year's Joe Burrow, even though he's not necessarily Joe Burrow.
For sure.
But I think he could be 5th, and then probably Mac Jones 6th. And there's always one guy who kind of comes out of the blue who enters the mix late, like a Jordan Love did, who I kind of liked last year. But it's crazy that you do have 6 quarterbacks in a year like this that could all very easily go in the first round.
I saw earlier today CBS had JT Daniels being selected 16th by the Bears. Is that crazy or what? A man who has started one game this year and has not played college football other than this one game against Mississippi State in 2 years.
Talent-wise, he is phenomenal. He came out as he missed his senior year of high school to go to USC. So he's still really young, really inexperienced. I'm always mega biased against smaller quarterbacks. I know Kyler Murray, doesn't really fit and has been fine with that. And Baker Mayfield, has done all right. I personally give me the 6'5", 240-pound, guys who, Josh Allen, Cam Newton, the guys, they're really big athletes. Yeah. More than the smaller quarterbacks. And JT Daniels just is not a big guy. So to me, that's a little crazy. If you're the Bears, you're hoping for someone else there other than JT Daniels. I don't see him going 16th overall.
I don't either. I thought that was a stretch, but like you said, there's always a guy coming out of the blue.
Well, if you want your guy, former Georgia quarterback Jamie Newman, who was there, transferred from Wake Forest. There's the guy who fits the 6'4", ish 220-pound size, arm, Wake Forest smarts and everything when he came to Georgia, and he opted out for this season. And he's going to be one of those guys who, once he hits the draft circuit, he's going to rise up the charts really, really fast.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for that. Thank you for talking college football with us. The college football playoff, I guess, system was super interesting to me. I'm assuming Ben too and all the listeners. I think we're going to end the show here, though. Thank you again for joining us, Mr. Pete Fiutak. I linked your website in the bio. Doubt we won't get more than 40 or 50 views, but hey, everything helps. His articles are fabulous. I read a good bit of them. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Peace.